Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Stricherz. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It is the week of January 7th, Season 4, Episode 1. It is the last of the Christmas season, the Feast of the Epiphany, Little Christmas. Ann and I have taken a break, and I really missed it. I am excited to be back taping our podcast. Our goal is to complete 24 episodes in 2024. Ann is recently back from her faculty retreat where she had a special speaker. Ann, welcome. I am truly so excited to be back working with you, talking to you, connecting with you, hopefully twice a month.
That's right. Great to be back, Haley. In the time that we have taken this pause, I don't know, the podcast world, it just continues to explode. And there's so much that's shared, but I think Faith Fondue has its own little niche. And yeah, a goal of 24 and 2024, something we get to share. And it's a great way for us to unpack some ideas and offer them to our audience. So I wanted to start with the speaker. His name is Padraig Otuma. He's from Cork in Ireland. And I mentioned him because I got to know who he was through a podcast. So On Being with Krista Tippett. Padraig is a regular contributor. He has a podcast called Poetry Unbound. And so a couple of things about Padraig. He is a theologian. He's obviously a poet and Irish. So those things alone drew me in, and he's brilliant and fascinating. And poetry is kind of an area I don't really know a lot, and we could, talk a lot about poetry, but I'll just say this. Growing up, he learned a poem a week, wow. One in Irish and one in English.
Wow.
So you would think that, as a cultural value, they would offer that. So on our retreat, Padraig offered 4 poems that he kind of, dissected, for lack of a better word, unpacked, and we offered them in prayer, reflection, small group. What a great way to kind of start the year as a teaching, as a staff and anyone involved in our school. Everybody goes. So I don't know, Haley, what's your thought on poetry, and is it something that you read or enjoy or familiar with? Do you have a favorite poem?
So, it's interesting you asked that, because I would not say I am an intentional poetry reader. I don't seek it out. I'm not sure I've ever read a book on poems or with poems, except for maybe when I was younger, Shel Silverstein. He's probably the one poet that I can name that would come to mind so quickly. But it's really funny because I write a Christmas poem every year. And I'm in the middle of doing it right now. It's more of my New Year's poem. Clearly people, and I don't say this because I wrote it, but I've gotten several text messages, people reaching out because they haven't received our Christmas card yet. And they have said they've missed the poem and could they please go back on the list. And it's not that they're off the list. It actually is really hard to come off our Christmas card list. But we did New Year's cards this year. So I love that. I love reflecting on my year and putting it together in poem. And so I spend time anytime I am listening to poetry, which clearly I must, because even though I'm not intentionally seeking it out, I'm constantly noting words that rhyme or phrases that go together, and making note of that because I know I'm going to write this poem at the end of the year. So no, I wouldn't say I'm a big poet or into poetry, but one of the things that I find most meaningful as a tradition is writing this Christmas poem.
What a great tradition. And you made me laugh, the question of the idea of, it takes a lot to get off your Christmas card list, because I do get some cards and I'm often surprised. Honestly, with the cost of a stamp and, with social media today, I think it's a wonderful tradition, but that anyone still does that and that they reach out. So it's funny to just name that's part of your list, but it's delightful to hear that poem has meaning for so many people, and it's something that you're intentional about. And also that you could name a poet. I asked our faculty in preparation for the treat, do you know a poem by heart? Do you have a favorite poem? And here I was thinking, I've got a favorite. I've got a poem by heart. And I realized I don't know all of them all the way through. Listen to
Interesting.
my children and you shall hear the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, and it stops there. Or Carlson Fog, right?
Right.
I didn't get through. So never throw any stones, because yeah, you got to test your own, you got to know yourself. But it was a great way just to kind of think about the year
Hmm.
in that framework. And what a gift. I do wonder what it's like to see the world as a poet. I mean, you have to be keenly observant. I appreciated that about him. You have to love words,
Right.
uh,
Absolutely.
deeply emotive. So
And and
he
vu-
often to
and
think of.
vulnerable too, I would imagine, right? When you're really sharing a part of yourself in a way that's very personal.
So
So probably a humility there as well that I'm sure was admirable also.
yeah, it was great. So
Well, just for a reminder for some of our listeners and for those who are new, a couple of things that I'm going to give you a shout out for, Anne. So I'm going to guess, although you haven't said this, that 24 episodes in 2024 stems from what I believe is a tradition you've always had, which is something as a New Year's resolution that relates to the year. I know you've done X number of churches in, let's say 21 churches in 21 churches in 2021. So when I saw that you were reaching out to start up 24 episodes in 2024, I thought, oh, I know where this is coming from. Thank you for doing that. I have missed our time together, so I appreciate that you're roping me back into this tradition. As part of Faith Fondue, we have a couple different parts of our podcast that we follow. We have the flame, which we will talk about what's hot this week, our spiritual stew, which is a reflection on the gospel and anything else that Anne and I happen to be reading. And then, of course, the melting pot, which is the funnest part of fondue, our takeaways and what we want to move forward with. So we can move on to the flame. What is hot this week? I will tell you, I am very cold right now. We are in the midst of a kind of an East Coast storm, and it, of course, is winter, so I'm always cold. But what is hot this week, Anne? What are you up to? I know you're back at school. What do you have going on in this, early January?
Yeah, well, we honestly have the opposite, Haley. I don't know if I can say that, but our days have been gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a little bit of rain. People who in the Bay Area ski complain that there's no snow up in the Sierras, but we have had days of sunshine and no wind, and we had so much rain for so long. I've loved it. And Haley, I know you're recording in a new home and you talked about the sunsets, or excuse me, the sunrise that you
Mm-hmm.
get to see. And I've really enjoyed the sunrise and the sunset in the Bay Area recently, because we had a very long winter, but our true winter has been wonderful. So it's not been cold. It's been nice to be outside. So yesterday I went for a long walk, and thanks to Padre, my students do this activity where they have to write down 100 things that they see. So the assignment was on Friday and it's Monday. They had to write down 100 different objects, observations, and it's to train themselves and just to pay attention. So it was interesting just to look at their list. So much was about color,
Mm-hmm.
um, a blue pen, a aquamarine fleece jacket. Not that interesting, but they all kind of talk about the process of observing. And I think again that's related to poetry, but I also think it's related to the spiritual life, that we are kind of called to pay attention and be really kind of take that long look. And so yesterday on the walk, it is amazing to me that I will see things in my neighborhood I've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I also saw the former general manager of the Golden State Warriors. He lives in the area. He's tall because he played basketball, and he looked so relaxed. And I thought, yeah, I bet you are. You got out at the right time. So it was just kind of fun to have these different observations where you kind of train yourself to see something. I don't know if that resonates with you, but it's a good exercise.
Oh, I love that. It actually reminds me, oftentimes when I'm driving with my kids, not so much anymore because they don't live at home full time, but I I observe. I am not on my phone when I am a passenger in the car. most other people, including my husband and my household, are. And I feel like they miss things. I love looking out the window. I spent
Yeah.
8 hours in the car this past weekend, mostly driving myself. But I noted that my son who I was with, I was driving him back to school, was not on his phone. And we had great conversations about things we saw out the window. And, we took a pretty significant trip over Christmas, which I'm happy to share. But that was a lot of observing time. And I had asked them, that was my request for them as their Christmas gift to me was, will you please be fully present on this trip?
Oh,
You're going to miss things if you're not fully engaged. And this is the whole purpose of this trip. And they were, they were amazed. And I was amazed, actually. I had actually bought them portable cell phone chargers so that they could take pictures as we were out for, hours and hours at a time. And they actually looked at me and said, well, Mom, I didn't think we were supposed to bring our phones. And I thought, okay, you really are listening to me. But so yes, it speaks volumes to me, because I do think in this day and age, people are on their phones so much, whether it's when they're walking through a city, whether it's as a passenger in the car, and they miss so much. And it really, it strikes a nerve with me just personally in my own family, the attachment to phones. But I do, you miss so much. And there's just, I love that assignment. These are the moments when I talk to you when I really miss teaching, because I think that would be a great assignment for students. Because you're right, they're looking at it, they're starting kind of at superficial things, right? The blue pen, the aquamarine jacket,
yes.
But they're going to get it, as they practice it, as we all do, whether it's our faith or anything else that we're doing, you start, superficial. And then as you continue to practice it, you become better and better at it. And my guess is as they continue to practice really observing, they will see deeper and deeper into what's out there. I love that. I think we miss a lot of the world when we're looking at our phones.
I agree. And it is a discipline. It's something, that you have to really, the trained eye will see. And we just talk about, the class is sports and spirituality. There's no sport where vision isn't an advantage. You can have a no look pass in basketball and trust that your teammate is where he or she is, but you also involve peripheral vision. So I love it. And I'm using a metaphor right now, but when the starting point with this exercise is no metaphor, right? And according to Padre, the class where this is taught, it's at Sarah Lawrence College. He says by the end, students actually don't want to do metaphor. They really want to be specific and hone in. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see, if it offers some new lenses and whatnot. But it's a good way of thinking about 2024, maybe with a sharper vision to pay attention, to notice and look. And I don't know. So
And to be
how about
present.
you? Do you have a resolution for the year?
So
Haley?
I have thought about that a lot. It's since our last podcast, I hit a new decade. There is something really interesting about turning 50. As I have reflected on many times, I turned 50 in August, so it's been a few months. I am on the back end at this point. My life is halfway done. And that's kind of a joke in our house anyway. It started when my brother's 5 years older. It started when he turned 25. Okay. And I said to him on his 25th birthday, which now was 30 years ago, oh, Stephen, you're halfway to 50. And so it's been this joke, right? My son turns 10, you're halfway to 20.
Oh my goodness.
You turn 30, you're halfway to 60. Well, I turned 50, I'm halfway to 100. I am probably not living past that. And if I do, the quality of my life is probably not going to be where I want it to be and truly active. So it's very reflective to turn 50 and start thinking about, okay, what are my priorities here? And it sounds very cliche, but it's very real. And there are things that you can do when you're 50, but that you can't do when you're 80. And there's things that you can do when you're 80. So I'm going to save those for 80. But it is interesting. And one of the things that I have noticed, and I think you'll hear me talk about this a lot, hopefully over these 24 episodes, is really trying to keep it real. And that goes beyond just sort of the social media posts of, oh, look what my kids did, or look what this trip we took was, or look how great this is. Or it's not so much that. I actually love reading about my friends' kids and the trips they take. And I celebrate all of that. That to me is, I love that. But it's more just not glossing over the parts of life that are really tough. And I don't know if that's just certain experiences that I've had recently, if it's turning 50. I, like you, Anne, and I know you're comfortable talking about this sometimes, live with some physical challenges still too, from, leftover nerve damage, residual from the accident. And I tend to gloss over that a lot. And part of it is because if I focused on it every day, I'd never get out of bed. And so there is a part of me that is always upbeat and always happy and always looking at the bright side. And as my mother would say, it's not only that I see the glass half full, but a chocolate soda in the glass. That is something she has said often. So I get that. And I like that about me. I like being that person. But there is an element to that maybe doesn't always share what's really going on. And let's be honest, when you ask someone how they're doing, you don't want to hear all of their ails and pains for 10 minutes. But I do think there's times where you can say, oh my gosh, not my best day, but, I'm here and life is good and I'm going to power through. I think it's okay to say that. I think it's okay to not gloss over things that are really tough or painful or hard. And so I'm going to work on that. Again, not in a Debbie Downer kind of way, not in a way that is negative. Certainly not. I'm not sure I could be negative if I tried. But I do want to make sure that I am being real in a way that sets the expectation or sets the example for whoever's watching, whether it's my kids or the students that I'm around or my colleagues or friends, sets the expectation that life doesn't always have to be easy or happy or any of that, that I can be very real about what's going on. So that is probably a very lofty goal. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of being very present and keeping my eyes open. So help me with it. You have to keep me on task.
Because I think it's really an ethos, like an approach to how you want to live. I think it's tied in, I'm turning that new decade in February. So, I've been thinking people who are, I don't want to say our elders. That sounds so formal, but women in particular that I play golf with, because you have some time on the golf course, will talk to me about turning 50 and what that means and what it meant for them. And it's actually kind of been, to use your word, a real conversation. They took a Irish friend and he calls it a life audit. He's like, we're going to do a life audit. We're going to sit down and we're going to go through a couple of things. And I think the only thing to do in a life audit is to be real. So I appreciate that kind of perspective. And I'm looking forward to talking about it. Part of me, it makes me laugh because when I went to El Salvador on immersion in 2008, we took a bus. Our transportation in the country was this bus, and it said "Be Real." That was the name of the bus. So I had this picture, and it's like on my shelf, "Be Real," but we called it "Sea Real," which is like the Spanish mandate for "Be Real." So we can offer this in 2 languages. Be real.
Okay. Yes. Well, do you know there's a new social media app out called Be Real?
I think, okay, so you're involved in a trend? Is that what you're saying?
No,
here?
not at all.
Yeah, you're part of a trend?
I am on Be Real because my kids post, only one of them on Be Real. So when he's at college, I get to see a picture of him every day, which is the only reason I'm on it.
Is it at a certain time?
It does. So there's a notification that pops up and you have like 2 minutes to take a picture. So, there's no filters, there's no putting on makeup, there's no taking 17 different options to see what you look like. It's silly. It's fun. But I'm not sure how real it is because, of course, people figure out a way. But anyway, that is my goal for this year.
Yeah, well, the counterpoint is there's a lot of things like you named the filter. I'm thinking of so many things in our society that honestly want us to not be real. And as we move towards AI, which is like, a Pandora's box, right?
Right.
In terms of your writing and your voice, but yes, our physical appearance and alterations, so many different things, the way we appear. Yes, the filter is just the easiest starting point. And
right.
So, so yes, there's a lot to consider. One of my favorite phrases, my old roommate, who's she's so fun and smart, and she always says, "Keep it real." That's like her little tagline, and it always, I like it. Keep it real, as opposed to not. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
How about you, Anne, before we move to the spiritual stew? Any
Well,
other new resolutions or things you're
yeah.
thinking about?
So, I am a big resolutions person, and I traveled. My mom and I went down to Balboa Island, this place in Newport Beach. It's one of my favorite places. We go to this Christmas home tour. And so I said, Mom, what are your resolutions? And then she offered a few. And I said, well, are you going to ask me mine? She's like, well, I know you have like 5 of them. But this year I don't have a specific one. I do the list of 24 for 2024. So I've written those down. And some of them are just small things. This is from the Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. I read an article about all the waterfalls in the Bay Area. So I want to go on a waterfall hike, just one where I encounter one of those. I think it's good to be in nature like that. I have a very specific goal for my golf handicap. I want to visit a friend in San Diego. So I'm only at 8. Last year, am I 23 for 23? I do a bigger goal, but I only wrote down 15. I will say I probably did like 13 of the 15.
Good for you.
So I think it's good. I mean, anybody can check off. I mean, I will be able to check off the waterfall hike. If I see it and you have to revisit it, something that you go back to, you should be able to do it. One of my goals is to read 24 books this year. That's 2 books a month. I think it's doable.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think? Your audiobook. We know your audiobook.
I am an
Okay.
audiobook person. I'd love to. I have some recommendations I can give you. I'd love to talk about
Okay.
that. We can share some more books. But yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah. So think about it. Think about 24 for 24.
Okay,
You, our listeners, it's kind of a fun way to frame your year. So
absolutely.
between that and being real, there's plenty of work to do.
And 24 is a good one because it does average out to 2 a month. So when you look at it that way, it does seem pretty doable for whatever it is. All right, our spiritual stew this weekend is the Epiphany of the Lord, Matthew's reading of the arrival of the Magi. It is interesting. I love the Magi. I love the Three Kings. I have a book that I pick up every year during Advent as I'm
Mm,
preparing for Christmas. It's called The Revelation of the Magi by
mm,
Brent Landau. And I have a hard copy of it. I did finally download it so that I could listen to it as well. It is for me, a very difficult read in the sense that it is very scientific. There are tens of footnotes almost every page, and
wow.
I like to know all that, right? I want to know why they're adding on a little bit of information about this particular word or topic. But it's fascinating in the sense that the Magi are not mentioned very often in the Bible, really
Right.
at all, and yet they've become, like most things that we do with religion at times, a really big deal and very well known and very commercialized in some ways, not like some things. But people know about the Three Kings. They know the three wise men. Maybe they know we call them the Magi. But the revelation of the Magi is the scientific and historical context of who these three men
Yeah.
might have been. I don't want to say
Right.
actually were. I'm not sure
Yeah.
we actually
Right.
really know. But even talking about, the Bethlehem Star, the North Star, and what was going on in the world at that
Mm,
time and why they might have, from a scientific standpoint, seen this really, amazing guiding bright star. And so for me, it's fascinating because I do live with a scientist. I am a real believer
ah,
in the science of it, but it also science is faith as well. And so it merges both of those and helping us understand who these men were at this time and, where they were living and what their careers or jobs or callings might have been and why they
yeah.
would have been specifically where they were then traveling and detoured. And so again, it's a difficult read. It's not a quick read. It's
Mm,
a short book, but I find it very laborious in terms of just making sure I'm following it all.
mhm. Wow. It's so interesting the perspective on which you took, yeah, a story that's familiar and then looking at it from this different approach. I think that's fantastic. I teach about this reading because
Mhm.
my sophomore class is the Gospel of Matthew. So, one thing is that we don't even know there were three of them. We assume there's three because there was three gifts.
Right.
But, just even the symbolism of the gifts, gold and then frankincense, like incense for like his
Mhm.
priestly role, and then the myrrh for the body, when prophesizing his suffering and death. But one thing that stuck out to me when I heard the reading this Sunday and the gospel reflection was Jesus was born in such difficult times. And I've been feeling that way a lot about our world
Mhm.
between violence and war and whatnot. And so to know that our Savior was born in a time that was also, Herod, his reign and his terror, and why the
Mhm.
wise men went a different way. It's a profound, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Interesting.
edict. So, yeah. So it was helpful to know that a Savior was brought into that time because his message is still needed today.
Which is one of the things I find amazing about. There's another book that I pick up every so often. I've had it for probably 20 years. It's called Jesus Calling. And it's a short reading every day. And when it was given to me years ago, the woman who gave it to me said that she reads it every year and she just makes notes in the column or on the page, and every year, just based on where she is at a different point in her life, the readings have different meanings or the reflections have different meanings. I also have another book that a friend recently gave me that I've started reading as well, that I will definitely talk about as we get further along in this podcast series, which is based on the Jesuit teachings, which I know is very near and dear to your heart. A little newer to me, coming into getting to know the Jesuits, but I'm enjoying that as well. But one of the things that I find really interesting between that book, Jesus Calling, the book I'm reading now, and then an Advent program that my mom created 50 years ago that I still use with my own family, is how universal these messages are and how they seem to be relevant year after year after year with everything that's going on in the world. Hardship is not new. Reign of terror is not new. Interesting
Hmm.
politicians are not new.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how the message that we get from our faith is so relevant, even though it's 2 centuries, two millennial old.
Right.
I find that fascinating. So it is, you're right. Jesus came to us at a time when there was a lot of unrest, and we are not far from that now.
Yeah. And that's why we return to the scripture, because the word doesn't change, but our life experiences do. So we only add to it. So I can visualize this person who's written the notes, and again, it's a great story though. If you want a dramatic story, take right the story of these three wise men who I think they believe were probably like Zoroastrianism. They practiced Zoroastrianism from like Persia, and that they travel from afar and they find right this child, who was in an upper room. And that's another piece that
Mm-hmm.
Padre taught us about. The reality of where Jesus was probably born is in this extra room that a place would have had. But that's for another time. And yeah, that they went home another way. It is a dramatic story. It's a
Right.
great story, but the truths, right, that emerge from the story are worth just holding on to. So it's a meaningful way to end the Christmas season, which is always hard for me because Christmas joy,
I
it
know.
is, I know it's so cliche, it's the most wonderful time of the year, but I kind of get it why people say it. It is a special time of year.
It really is, and the January gloom is real in
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
ways, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we can talk about that too
Yes.
as we move
Right.
forward in our episodes as well.
Solutions and ways we can make it through.
Absolutely, and
So
keep and be real about it.
yeah,
So
that's
the
right.
last part of our podcast is always the melting pot, our takeaways. What are our goals for the week? What do we want to take away from what we've heard today? What are we going to challenge each other and our listeners on? And I think you're challenging us with listing 24 things to do in 2024.
Yeah, and Haley, I think you have challenged me. I am the worst about my phone. I don't like it about myself. I
Okay.
don't. And here I am preaching about this observation thing, but I just I'm not proud of it, and I would like to really detach a little bit. I do think like socially and in certain settings, I'm not the person that's it's only when I'm by myself that I am like, scrolling or whatnot. But if I'm with you or with somebody else, I'm very detached. But I don't like that energy that it brings to me. So gonna practice that. And then I think I want to pay attention to when I think people are real. Like if I notice that in another person that they are real, does that mean they're vulnerable with me? Does that mean that we've just slowed down? Does it mean that I don't know, part of me thinks when we're real, we might be a little less self-consumed and maybe a little more open to the other person. So I offer this, as a personal practice too. Like maybe me being real means, listening and just being open to where people are at and maybe what they're going through. So,
Well, I think it circles back to the activity that you had your students do is just observing, and
yeah,
when we open our eyes to see what's truly out there, I think that's going to be as real as we can be, and making sure that we're seeing it not through our own lens, but the lens of what's truly there. Which I think it takes effort, it takes practice, like all good things. It's going to take effort and practice for us to connect, but I am committed to doing it. I will thank you again for reaching out to suggest this. I have really missed it. It's been a grounding experience for me, and it's kept me on track. So I am really excited to continue this conversation and to just share. I feel like we both have so much to offer in different ways, and I love how you balance out a lot of what I share. So I look forward to our next episode.
I do too. I hope our audience feels that way. And, we didn't have time for it today, but I am fascinated by the Kelsey brothers. I think their podcast, I think it's excellent. I'm only seeing the highlights on social media, but yes, there is it is fun to listen to them. So I don't totally know the mission, like the objective of their podcast, but I think we have a pretty clear one. So for our listeners, right, this is a melting pot of topics about our faith, because I think we're two women who really value that and want to share it. We feel like we've been given a gift. I'll speak for you a little bit there, but I think we both feel like we have a real gift in terms of having experiences that have shaped and formed a faith. And it's not something that can just be isolated. It's something that needs to be shared. So in that process of talking about it on the air, we hope it inspires other people, but also that we get some feedback from what people learn and how it helps them grow. So
I love that. Happy New Year. Until next time.
You got it.